Hey everyone, it's Connor from the Collab 365 team, and first of all I'd like to welcome you all to this second live stream of mine, and hopefully it's going to be a regular occurrence over the coming weeks as well. I know that John's got a live event coming up scheduled for next week, which looks very interesting as well, so get yourselves booked onto that. These are free events for everybody in the academy. Speaking of which, there are some people watching this on our social platforms, so Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, and I believe Twitter. So if you are wanting to get involved in the academy, you can head over to c365.io/academy, and you'll basically be able to find all the instructions to get inside and involved with the conversation over there as well. So today's agenda. We're going to be talking about Power Automate Desktop. Now, it's something that's kind of a little bit on the fence as to people's familiarity with it. It's a kind of a side product, if you like, to Power Automate. But it's very powerful, and a lot of people aren't actually aware of the power it can actually bring. So we'll get into Power Automate Desktop in just a little bit. I'll tell you a bit about myself. My name's Connor. I am one of the support coaches and trainers at Collab 365. We've just started running a 5-day challenge over at the academy as well, which is currently in day 2 of its initial run, which is very exciting. So I will be jumping off no later than 3 to get involved with that. So that leaves us about an hour and a half to kind of have a look at Power Automate Desktop and how I and the team at Collab 365 have made use of Power Automate Desktop to achieve some pretty awesome stuff. So don't be afraid to get involved in chat as well. You can ask me questions either on any of the social platform comment sections, or you can use the chat window on the right hand side if you're watching this in the academy as well. I love Pad, saved me literally hours converting and saving documents into different forms of locations. Yeah, it can be used for many different things. So we've mainly used it for, actually going back and thinking about it, we've used it for quite a various amount of things, and that includes automatically generating images based on input from an Excel spreadsheet. We've also run social posts out to social platforms using Power Automate Desktop as well. And that's going to be specifically the use case that I'm going to be showing you today, and we're going to go into a few of the different steps as well on how Power Automate Desktop works. So if you're more interested in the solution I'm about to show you, there is a session that myself and John Mandeville did back in January, which is available at Solutions Day, which basically covers more of the kind of app and the more Power Automate Cloud Flows side of things. But today I just really kind of want to dive into Power Automate Desktop and show you guys what's possible and how we made use of it. So yeah, I've asked this earlier, but how many people in chat, across both the chats I suppose, are familiar with Power Automate Desktop? What have you used it for? Have you tried any of the features out? So yeah, the specific use case that we used it for is something that got quite complex very quickly, and that was, we are only a small team at Collab 365. There is 5 of us at the moment, and one of the big challenges for the team was being able to actually handle a lot of the social side of our marketing out to our social platforms, whether that be Twitter, LinkedIn, TikTok, Instagram, wherever it may be. We needed to be able to surface posts in those platforms without the hassle of going and spending hours each day going and posting to all of those individual platforms. So there were 2 options that kind of popped out to us as a team when we were thinking about this build. And the first of them was we could use the APIs for these platforms. We could tap into the Facebook API and we could go and make a post that way, and we could do this across multiple platforms. But the issue with that is Facebook and LinkedIn and a lot of these platforms are very clever at blocking out content that you want people to see based on stuff like links, for example. It's very smart, and it knows when a human is not going to be posting that. It knows when the API is being used. So one of the things that we wanted to solve was, how do we act like a human is performing these kind of tedious actions of posting social posts each day, and kind of falsify Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, all the social platforms into believing that a user was actually going in and posting these. So we had to come up with a different option. So the API wasn't going to work for us. The second option was going to be to use that API and create a custom connector in the Power Platform. Because as you've seen, and no doubt you're aware, that when you go into the Power Platform and you look up some of these popular social media services, I think LinkedIn has a connector and I believe Twitter has a connector, but they're very limited in terms of what you can actually do with those connectors. So this is where like Power Automate Desktop comes in. So you tried to download but could not because of restrictions. So as far as I'm aware, Power Automate Desktop is a free app. I think it becomes a premium app if you're starting to look into the RPA side of things, which is the dealing of flows inside Power Automate. And when you trigger those and when you want those to run, I think that's when it becomes a premium connector. I'd like to know what restrictions you've had regards that. So I'm just going to load up Power Automate Desktop, and we'll have a quick look at the interface. So you can actually go and download this using a link, which I will go and grab for you. Just bear with me a second. I did have it up, but I must have closed my desktop at some point. So that is the link to go ahead and download Power Automate Desktop. For Windows 11 users, one thing I will say is you will have to go through the Microsoft Store. For some reason, it doesn't allow you to use the download link that's available in Windows 10, even though a lot of applications have been cross-platform between the both of them. So as being a Microsoft product, you will have to go through the Microsoft Store built into Windows 11 if you are wanting to download that. So yeah, Richard, if you try that download link for me, if you just scroll down, I think it's about halfway through the page. I'll just share my screen as well. If you scroll down to about halfway through the page, you'll come up to this section here. So you've got this Windows 10 and Windows 11 users. I think what I did was do the Windows 10, and this opens up the Microsoft Store. And then from the Microsoft Store, you'll be able to download it from here as well. If you're using Windows 10, I believe you'll be able to also now access it through the Microsoft Store. I know it used to be a downloadable executable file. I haven't used Windows 10 since the first launch of Windows 11, unfortunately. But as far as I remember, when my system was built in Windows 10, it was an executable that had to be downloaded. So yeah, let's jump into Power Automate. So yours will look a little bit different from mine. This is kind of about 30 odd flows that have been built over the past, where you can see past 7 or 8 months, which both myself and Mark Jones have spent a lot of time inside trying to get things working, learning it as well, because it's quite a learning curve compared to other things that you'll see in the Power Platform. However, it still kind of works on that kind of same process that Power Automate would, in that linear process where you have step-by-steps to control the flow of your automation, if you like. So at the top here, we have our environments. Now, we're not going to change the environment, but this is basically going to surface all of the environments that you have within your Power Platform tenancy. So I'm just going to use the default one here, which is where everything's saved, just so I can show my demos with you. And you can also check that you've got the right version as well by clicking settings, and you can check for updates, because I've noticed that sometimes with Power Automate Desktop it doesn't actually automatically update, which is a bit of a pain, but I'm assuming now the Microsoft Store is now client side running the Power Automate Desktop. It should automatically update, as most apps do in there as well. So one thing I'm going to point out while I'm here is I like to make sure that the auto start application is enabled, and the reason for this is because what I'm going to show you later on in this demonstration is that Power Automate can wake up a computer, any computer that has Power Automate Desktop installed and is logged into your Microsoft account, and it can begin running desktop flows from that specific device in which the flow was built. So that just means that whenever I put my computer to sleep and I wake it up, or whatever I decide to do, that Power Automate Desktop is going to start, and it's going to be able to start running flows as it's required to. And you can actually see behind me, just next to my guitar there is a laptop which is actually running, I think we initially called it Brenda. I'm not sure why. It was a name that kind of come up, and it became our social media advocate, if you like. She was in control of running all of our social media. I mean, we'd go and put in all the posts as required, which again I'll show you in a bit. But that old laptop from probably about 10 years now, maybe slightly less, is capable of being our sixth employee, if you like, that handles all of our social media interaction, which is kind of a cool concept when you think about it like that, and the amount of time and money that you can save by having a second laptop. I mean, like I say, it's running very old hardware, and it's capable of keeping up with what we've asked it to do, which is quite cool. So yeah, John's just put some instructions in there as well. So if you are struggling to download it, then you can just click on that link, and you'll be able to follow what John's just mentioned there as well. So just like Power Automate in Cloudflows, all of your flows will be listed in a kind of single space, and you don't really get given many options as in terms of like a folder structure or managing as such the different flows that you may be running in your business, which is why you can see some pretty interesting naming conventions that we've got here, where we've basically just said what they are, what they're doing, and differentiated them in that way. It just makes it easier for any one of our team to kind of come in here and know exactly what they need to find. So it's always good to name your flows as appropriate. So at the top here, we've got these 3 tabs. Now, there only used to be 2 tabs. We used to have My Flows, and we used to have Shared With Me. And if it works, there we go. So you can see Shared With Me here is basically, this is going to work exactly the same as Power Automate would, in the way that if you share a flow with somebody, they will also be able to access that flow, and if they have the correct permissions, they'll also be able to edit as well, which makes it very useful when I'm wanting to use my more powerful system that's in front of me to build out my flow, and then send it over to what I'm going to call the half piece of junk behind me, which takes quite a while to actually manage and process anything or any inputs that I put into it, which is very useful. And it also helps when you're sharing these flows amongst your team as well. So the third tab we have, and this is a new tab. Now, I've not looked at this too much because this is, like I said, Power Automate Desktop was a software technology that we were using a few months ago to run a lot of our, for example, our daily digest, which if you saw the Power App stream last week, you'll know kind of the back end of that was run in Power Automate Desktop. We didn't go into that too much. I might be able to give you a bit of a demonstration today. But yeah, in the more recent time that Power Automate has been updated, we've got this new examples tab, and this is very similar to what you see in Power Apps and Power Automate in the Power Platform as well. In terms of, you've got these examples that you can kind of learn from and also make use from. So again, I'm not going to go into these too much, but it's a really good place to start if you want to understand the structure of a Power Automate desktop flow and how it works. For instance, we have this run an application flow, which is a desktop automation. And we can go into this by selecting this little pencil icon, which is our edit icon. And this is going to create us a example flow. If you just give a second, it's going to give me some prompts. But it'll give you a little bit of an insight into what a Power Automate desktop flow actually looks like. Now, this is very simple in terms of what this flow is doing. We have some variables on the side here, which again, we're not going to go into just yet. But I'll give you a quick rundown of what the initial Power Automate desktop interface looks like. So on the left here, we have actions, and this is an ever-growing list of actions that you can perform on your desktop. So if you have a look up the side here, we have things like variables. We can create lists, we can add items to lists, we can set variables, we can increase variable values and decrease variable values. There's plenty of things again across all of this stuff. So we've got variables, we've got conditions, you can do if statements, else ifs, and we can do switches, which is almost identical to the way switches work inside of Power Automate as well. One thing that's really cool is you can do loops, which is very useful when you're wanting to work with data inside Excel, where you're wanting to perhaps find a value inside one of your Excel cells. And you want to replicate that across any of the further actions that you want to do. So you've got loops and stuff in here as well. Before we go into any of the other stuff, I mean, I'm not going to go through this entire list. I'm going to leave that for you guys to explore because it is quite vast. There's a lot of things you can do here. Let me see if I can. I don't think I can zoom in because it's a native application. It's not in the desktop. However, I don't know if that might be a little bit too much, but I'll that might help a little bit. I'm not sure if it does, but just let me know if it doesn't. But one thing that we're going to look at mainly today is this browser automation. So one thing that Power Automate Desktop has, so I'm going to have to come out of this magnifier because I can't see my chat very well. Bear with me a second. I'm going to do something slightly different just to hopefully make this a little bit easier for you guys to see. So let me just add a source to my screen capture. Let me see if I can just fit that to screen. So hopefully that, let me just bring myself just over the top of there as well. Hopefully that's a little bit easier to see. I think that's the best I can do at the moment. If I change my res midstream, it will mess things up, unfortunately. But hopefully that makes it a little bit easier for you guys to see. In fact, I could probably just stretch this out a little bit like that. Just let me know if that's okay. Awesome stuff. So yeah, as I was saying, so the browser automation, this is one of two main tools that Power Automate Desktop offers you, and that is a web recorder and a desktop recorder. So the web recorder, should I say, is going to allow you to perform automated web actions. So inside either of your your web browsers. So this includes, if you look on the left here, you can see that we have this little bit of an extensive list, which is quite nice, as a lot of people have preferred browsers, as we've seen quite a lot in the tech industry. But we have Microsoft Edge, we have Chrome, we have Firefox, and we have Internet Explorer. And basically this is going to allow you to control any of the actions and any of the web elements that you'll be seeing inside a web browser. So one of the main things to consider here is it reads HTML as a way of retrieving, should I say, variables or options to allow for input inside a web page. And I'll show you how that works in just a little bit. But you have a few options, so you can click on links in links or elements, in a web page, and I'll show you exactly how that works when I get into a bit more of a demonstration later on. So we have browser automation, and we have other things. We've got Outlook as well. We can launch Outlook, we can send email messages. And another important one to mention as well is we also have mouse and keyboard. And this is really important where things like HTML web elements, like your div IDs and stuff, are perhaps not available, or there is no physical thing that you can click on or select, for example. But you can use like mouse buttons and keyboard keys to almost implement that for you. And I'll show you how we used that in an example a little bit later on, which is really nice. So that kind of covers the left-hand side panel, and that's our actions. At the top here, we have our Power Automate desktop controls. Now, these are the main controls, the main functions that you can use to save, run, and test your flow. And that's what these icons symbolize at the top here. So we can save our flow, we can run it. So this is a good way to test things as well. We can also run action by action. Now, this is very useful when you're debugging, as both myself and Mark Jones have experienced firsthand. When you have, for example, 30 to 50 things running in your flow, and they can happen quite quickly one after each other if you don't implement some form of delay or wait, which again I'll show you as part of an action a little bit later on. But what's really nice about it is you can actually run things action by action. So I could say, for example, run line 1, wait, I can see what happens, I can make notes, I can then run the next action. And this is going to kind of allow you to debug in a much safer and cleaner way. Up the top here as well, we also have this recorder up here. Now I think they've condensed this, I believe. Yes, so yeah, they've condensed this into one tool. So it used to be a desktop recorder and a web recorder. So now it works as the same thing, which I'll go a little bit into again when I get to the demonstration and my use case a little bit later on. So what do we have in this flow? As I mentioned, it's a very simple flow. So we have on line 1, we have a comment here, and this is just to allow users like myself, someone who's not built this flow, or for example, if I pass this on to somebody else, it's going to allow them to see exactly any comments, the standard stuff that you would usually see in code, and what you can also do in Power Automate and Power Apps as well. But it allows people to kind of see exactly what's going on in your flow. And again, you'll see how we've made use of that a little bit later on, because our flows did get quite complex. So we're doing this thing now next called Get Special Folder. Now, this is the first time I've seen this flow. I'm not sure what that does, but I can see from the comment above, it says this Get Special Folder action retrieves the path of the desktop folder that is later used as an initial folder for selecting the file in the dialog. So I'm assuming when I run this, it's going to initially give me the option to choose some sort of folder file location, and it's going to store that in a variable by the looks of it, and I'm assuming that's going to be this desktop folder variable, which is an input variable, I believe. And then it's going to, hopefully, if I've understood this correctly, it will allow me to then reuse that file location when selecting an application to run. So on initially running this for the first time, it's going to, I'm assuming, prompt me with some form of window, which if I run this by pressing that run button, there we go. So it's asking me to find a file. So I can, for example, I can choose, we'll choose last week's live session, which is just an MP4 file, and I'm going to press open. So I'm just going to move that to the side, and in fact I'm going to close that because that's now saved over here on the right hand side. So it's already found my desktop folder, and it's chosen it, and I can go in here and I can see view. We can see that the full name of this file path is my user, myself, and then my desktop. So it's found my desktop on here, and it's also found the selected file that I want to run, and it's just saved it in a variable. And you can see we've got my sequence 01.mp4, which is found in the directory and everything it needs. And this just means that now when I run this flow again, it should just open up that video for me, because all of that information surrounding that that variable has been saved as part of the flow. So I'm just going to test this by hitting the run button. So as you can see, it's asked me to check for a file again. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to save that. I'm not going to save, so I'm going to run it again, and I'm going to open my file. So that file saves on the right hand side. And I've just closed that. And the reason for this is I can then just go ahead and right click on these two actions, and I can disable these because I'm no longer using them. So we've got my run application, which is the only line of flow that's going to run when I press the run button. So you can see that so that's saved in selected file. So yeah, it's basically using that variable selected file from the previous dialog as a option to know which file I selected. So one thing that I can do here to actually be able to remove this and allow this to run completely automatically when I hit the run button without any input from myself is I can do what's called a set variable. And with this, I can drag this underneath here, and I can select my selected file using this little icon on the right here, which is going to allow me to select variables, and I can choose one of my existing variables. So I'm going to select selected file, and I'm just going to re-enable that action there. If you just bear with me 2 seconds, I just need to figure out where I've gone wrong with this. So what I can do is I can actually just create a new variable. I'm going to call this selected file 1, and I'm going to do the run the application to be selected file 1. And that should basically what that's doing. If I've got this right, again, it can get a little bit complex. But what I'm doing is I'm actually setting the selected file 1 to be the same value as the selected file. So when I run this the first time, it's going to allow me to hopefully save a file into selected file 1. And then when I go ahead and remove these previous steps that I'll never ever want to run again, I already know which application I want to open, it should have saved inside the selected file 1, and it'll know where that is. So I'll run this again. It's going to ask me to choose my file. I'll choose my file and press open. And now we can test this by disabling an action here and disabling an action here. And we should be able to disable this one as well. Okay, I'm not actually sure why that didn't work, but we can come back to that in a at some point later on maybe. But I'll just process this back to its original state, just so we haven't messed anything that's already existing up here as well. So overhead on the right hand side is where we store our variables, and this is quite a interesting thing which you can do, which we didn't discover until quite late into our build, how we could utilize this in an actual really elegant way, and that is, initially you have these variables which you can create as you please. So you can create these input and output variables. I'm not going to go too much into what input and output variables are. Essentially, an input variable is something that gets passed in, and an output variable is something that's going to get passed out somewhere else, whether it be another flow that you use further down the line, or in an instance I'm going to show you later is an output variable to power automate Cloudflows itself, which is where things can get really kind of cool. So that'll be your input and output variables. Underneath we have flow variables, and these are variables that are created by the various steps inside your flow. So you can see here that we have this get special folder, and it's storing the location of our desktop in this desktop folder path, which you can see this desktop folder path is a output variable inside our flow variables. Likewise, we have the selected file, which is going to be the file that we choose from this display select file dialog command here, and the selected file again is also an output variable which we can use later on in our flow. So I'm not going to get too much into anything else inside the interface of Power Automate Desktop, but what I will do is I will jump in and show you how we used it in our solution, which is really cool. So if you guys just bear with me, if there's any questions as well, just pop them in chat, and I'll do my best to answer them as well. Okay, so before we get into our desktop flow, as I mentioned at the beginning of this live stream, the fundamental part of the build, as such as what I'm going to show you, was part of our Solutions Day video, and it kind of goes more in depth into the solution as a whole, and more specifically the how we decided to actually build this Power Automate and the Power App, which John goes more into as well in that video. So if you're interested in finding out more about Solutions Day, I will grab you a link to that. I know that some of you may have already purchased Solutions Day. It's a fantastic day. There's loads of things and solutions to get caught up in as well, but I'll post that into the chat. For those that don't have access, you'll see a get access link where you'll be able to purchase that from our store as well. So yeah, if we just go ahead and jump into Power Automate. So you're all familiar with Power Automate. I'm just going to hide that window which I overlaid there. So hopefully you guys can see this. So yeah, like I said, if you're familiar with Power Automate, you'll know pretty much what the kind of gist of things are that's going on in this interface is happening here. So we can see that this flow is triggered when an item is created in a SharePoint list. Now I'm not going to go again too much into this. This is our SharePoint list. It's basically a list of social posts that we can post out to all of these platforms using the Power App that John Mandeville built. But there's some things that go on in the background. Now, apart from all of these variables that are being created, and we're doing a little bit of delays and waits until some certain times are met based on when we wanted the post to go out, we have this condition in here. And we're basically just waiting for the status of the submit thing in the submitted social post in the Power App to become scheduled. And once it does, we do a series of things. But we're going to be specifically looking at this this node right here, and this is Run a Flow built with Power Automate for desktop. Now, again, I don't want to take you too much into licensing and everything, because it can get complicated and complex, and I don't fully understand it myself, as I'm not in charge of licensing. However, I will post a link into chat, which is basically just going to go over some of the Power Automate desktop RPA licensing costs that you might need to be aware of if you do want to run a solution like this for yourself. But specifically, let's go into this this node here. So this looks fairly daunting to begin with. We've got a two fundamental bits of information which we can change, followed by what looks to be a bunch of variables with some values in, which are being passed in from that SharePoint connector, as you can see. I'm just going to make sure I'm keeping up with chat today, because got a small issue where the chat doesn't scroll, but hopefully that's being looked into. So as I was saying, we got these two fundamental bits of information which are marked by this asterisk here, and this is basically asking us which desktop flow we want to run. So when you set up this connector, and this can be found using I think it's a little bit more complex to find than you'd originally think, but I think if you type in, I think it's flow and desktop, that's the easiest way to find this premium connector. So it is a premium connector, as I did mention as well. But that's what you're looking for. Run a Flow built with the Power Automate for desktop. I think that was just the easiest way to find it. But I'm just going to create one of these from scratch, and you can see what happens. So it's got this issue with credentials, and this is because we've not made a connection to this node. Or more specifically, the connection it had to this node hasn't been found. And the easiest way to do this probably would be by creating a new flow to demonstrate this, but we'll see how we get on by including it where it already exists. So what you can do is we can add a new connection. And in here, you're given the option for a on-premises data gateway or directly to machine. Now, I've only ever used directly to machine, so I'm not really sure exactly how the other one works. I'm assuming that is for like the old versions of maybe SharePoint. I'm not too sure, but it could be as well like some form of LAN connection, which allows you to connect directly to something. But I use directly to machine, and what this allowed me to do was choose a series of machines that are available to me in this organization. So again, I'm not going to go and connect this up because I don't want to waste your guys' time doing this. But essentially what you're doing is you're putting in the username of the user on that computer and the password that you'd use to sign into that machine. So for instance, we use our support email address, which is our hello account, and then the password that we would sign into our Windows account or Microsoft account if you choose to sign into Windows that way. And then that allows you to create the connection between Power Automate the Cloud Flows and your Power Automate desktop running on your whichever machine you choose to. So I'm just going to delete that step. Is there any questions going forward on any of that I might be able to help you with? Okay, so the second information, it's trying to log me out there. So the second part of this node that we need to give information for is the run mode. Now this is where it becomes quite important. We have two main run modes that we can do here. This is attended and unattended. So an attended run flow basically requires the user, so the laptop that you're seeing behind me, it's not very visible. We'll go ahead and turn that around for you just so you can see its face. But basically that laptop is logged in. It won't ever log out unless I choose to, or it runs out of battery, but luckily it's constantly plugged in. And it is usually plugged into our docking station, which is next to it. but just for the purpose of this, I've taken it off because we was tampering with things yesterday to try and fix some new solutions that we've been working on. But yeah, so we run this in the attended run mode, which basically requires you to be signed into the computer. Now, if I show you the other option that we have here, we have unattended, and this is runs on a machine that is signed out. So the computer still has to be on for a flow to be running unattended. However, you don't need to be logged in. You can be sat on the lock screen, which is much safer for your organization as well, especially if you leave a device like this in a office, in a public office, for example. You may have cleaners going into that office whilst you're not at work, and they'll potentially, if you're on a logged in machine, they'll be able to go ahead and access maybe any personal information and customer information that you may be having on that machine as well. So it all depends on your use case, where you're also running the machine from. Again, I'm running this from my home office. It's only me here. There's 3 entrances to the building. It's very unlikely that that the information from this laptop is going to be stolen. So yeah, there's our attended run mode. Now, you're probably wondering where this other information is coming from and how we set it up. Now, this is something that kind of dawned on me when I was about halfway through the process of building this. Excuse me. I was halfway through the process of, just bear with me 2 seconds. So yeah, I was halfway through the process of building this when I realised that I could actually move information across Power Automate Desktop and Power Automate. So the initial thought with this was that I could create a node in here called run a flow built with Power Automate Desktop, and I could run it based on a condition or a trigger inside Power Automate, whether that be a scheduled time when a button is pressed in Power Apps, whether an item is put into SharePoint. I could just run that flow, and I thought that was all I could do with it, until I realised that I was seeing information coming back here the next day after I'd saved my flow. So this information here, this Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, TikTok, Instagram, run type, text, and file location are actually, I believe they're input variables from my Power Automate desktop flow. So I'm going to head back over into Power Automate, and I'm going to open up a flow, which is the flow that this is actually running. So I'm just going to go back to this quickly. So you can see that the flow that we're going to be running here is going to be the social scheduler. So if I just head back into Power Automate, there it is. And if I scroll down to the bottom here, you've got the social scheduler. So it knows exactly which flow to run. And I'm already actually editing this, so I can just pop into here. So this is an example of what I would call a more of an intermediate flow. There's not much going on here. It's actually very simple to understand compared to some of the other flows that we've done, which I might have time to show you soon. But again, I want to try and get through this as quickly as possible. So over on the right hand side here, you can see that we have these input variables. So we have error message, Facebook results, file location, Instagram. There's a bunch of things here, and some of them have actually got information in. And I'm assuming this would be from the last run, or the information that I've chosen to put in here during testing. But what's really cool is if you look at these variables and the name of these variables, they are identical to the variables that we're seeing in our variables that we're seeing in this node here in Power Automate. So what are we actually doing here? So I'm populating the variables inside Power Automate Desktop based on the actions that are occurring. So I think that'll do for Power Automate Cloudflows just for the moment. And I'm going to head back into this, and I'm just going to bring this up for you on here as well. I want to bring up this one. So there you go. Hopefully, just going to give this one a close. Don't save that one. So yeah, hopefully that's nice and easy for you to see. And like I said, there's a lot going on here, but it's actually quite simple when you begin to look at it. So I'm going to ignore most of the variable stuff, and I'm going to specifically look at what this flow is actually doing. And this is a flow which basically takes in some variables from my SharePoint list, which actually get passed in here. And it basically says whether or not, using the Power App that we created, again, if you want to find out more about this solution, you can go ahead and look at Solutions Day and find our session on there. It's a very interesting session. I'm very proud of this solution as well. It took quite a long time to build. But if you actually go and look on there, you'll be able to see how the back end of this and the Power App actually process this information. But essentially what's happening is a user inside Power Apps is going to say, right, I want my social post to go to, for example, LinkedIn. And when they choose that and the Power Automate Cloudflow kicks in, it gets passed into this flow here. And this is the social scheduler. And all this is doing is basically just determining which of the social platforms we're actually posting to, and it's going to go and run separate flows that are built inside Power Automate Desktop to actually go and run these. So we can see that for this example, the user has selected that they want the social post to go to LinkedIn, so it's been marked as scheduled. And we can see that the run type is a video. So we basically had the option to post videos or images inside our Power App. And obviously there are different buttons when you go into these social platforms that you can press to actually go and post these. But that might be a part 2, because I have a feeling this video is going to go on for quite some time if I spend all day talking about the fantastic solution that we built. But if we have a look here, we can see that it's going to do label start Facebook. Now this is a bit pointless here because it's the first label of our flow. And sorry, it just takes a while to update everything. There we go. So if we scroll down, we are basically running. Sorry, my flow keeps freezing. Just bear with me. So yeah, if we scroll down, we're basically running a bunch of conditions which are checking these variables for certain pieces of information. So for example, the first one here, we're running a condition where we're saying if Facebook, so the variable, we can see that it's a variable because it's surrounded by that circular box. I say it's a box, it's more of a, is it a box if it's a circle? That's a good question. But basically that's a variable, and it's checking here to see if the variable Facebook is equal to scheduled. So like I said, we can run these conditions using our actions on the left hand side here. So if it's equal to scheduled, then it will run the next part, and it's another condition. But we can see that there's nothing here, so it's going to move on to the next one. So we follow this outside blue line all the way down to end, and it's going to do start Twitter, and it's going to check the same for Twitter. Is Twitter equal to scheduled? And we can see that Twitter is not equal to scheduled. It's a blank variable. There's nothing in it. The user did not want to post their social post to Twitter. So again, we run down the side here, and we get to LinkedIn. Now this is where it gets interesting. So we can see that our LinkedIn variable here is marked as scheduled. So the same way that conditions work inside Power Automate Cloudflows, it will then basically go down that yes tree or no tree based on the outcome of that condition. That's essentially what's happening here, where the no tree is this blue line around the outside, and the yes tree, so with the condition is met, is everything inside. So it's kind of like a squared off brackets. So we can see that we're running, if the runtime is equal to video, then we're going to do some other things, which we know that we are. So we're only doing 2 things inside here. And the first of these is a action, like I said on the left here, an action, inside Power Automate Desktop, which is called Run Desktop Flow. And this is going to allow me to choose or select a secondary flow to run when it gets to this point in the flow, which we know it will. And this is called Social Slammer Post LinkedIn Post.video. So I'll show you exactly what's happening in that flow in just a second. Just bear with me a second, I'm just going to open my window. But as you can see, there are other things going on inside this flow as well. And we can see that we're setting a variable here. And this is the LinkedIn result. And we're just basically assigning this to the word success. So you can see at the moment there's nothing in here because this flow hasn't actually run. It's got these predefined variable values which we've defined by coming in here, and we've gone to edit. And you can see that these are input variables. We've got the variable name, but we're actually giving it a default value of scheduled. And this was just so I could test this flow. When this flow runs separately to, for example, pressing the play button here, it's going to pull in the variables that it actually needs during that run. So you don't have to worry about deleting, for example, test data or test variables inside here. They will be overwritten when your flow runs for what I'm going to say is for real. So yeah, we can see that obviously that has not been marked as success, and that's because this flow hasn't run. But we can see on the left hand side here is this blue shield icon. And this is where Power Automate Desktop actually gets really kind of complex, and that's in the way that you can actually run a series of things based on if one of your actions fails. So it implements error handling directly into Power Automate Desktop, and we can see exactly what's happening with that error by double clicking on it. And we can see that if the variable LinkedIn result, if this basically happens on all errors, should I say. So I just missed a little bit of information to share there. So at the top here, we've got this all errors. So this is basically if something goes wrong whilst running the previous flow. So you can see this flow here. If something goes wrong whilst running this, then it's going to give our variable a value. And this is going to be failed. And you'll see how we use this a little bit later. And it's going to append a error, which is part of my subflow, which I'm not going to go into at all during this. Subflows are basically extensions to your Power Automate Desktop flows. Really cool stuff. It allows you to just kind of manage what happens during a single flow a little bit easier. And all I basically did was run a separate flow, which gets triggered every time an issue happens during the run of my primary flow. But you can see what happens. So we run a subflow, which is that handle failed errors, that failed flows, which is back under my subflows, which I will show you the menu and how to access that in just a second. But I also wanted to specify that I didn't want it to just stop here. I didn't want the failure of posting to LinkedIn kind of determine what's going to happen with the rest. Because, for example, a user might have selected LinkedIn. They might have also selected TikTok, for example. They want a video to go out to both LinkedIn and TikTok. But TikTok appears further down in my flow. Now, just like what happens inside of Power Automate, if you right click, you can do configure run after. And that allows you to decide what happens during your flow should one of your nodes fail. Now, in most cases, if a node fails, your flow will stop and it won't continue running any of the rest of the items in your flow. So all I did here was basically say that I want to continue the flow, and then I use what's called labels inside of Power Automate Desktop to start the next label. Now, the label I'm looking for is start TikTok. And that's all that's happening there. So you can see that it's going to search for this label and it's going to run the rest of my my code, or should I say the rest of my automated actions which are created in Power Automate Desktop. So what happens to this information and how can you actually use it? So what I do here with this information is I actually return results back to my SharePoint list. And this is where Power Automate Cloudflows comes back in. So you can see here that what I'm doing is I'm actually passing in those schedule values which you saw earlier, which is where I'd run that kind of default value for LinkedIn. And I basically said that it was scheduled. This is where they would usually come from if the flow had run from my Cloudflow here. So it's checking that value inside SharePoint. Now this is my SharePoint list. So it's basically checking, for example, if I look at the latest one 13 hours ago, I can see that the Twitter here, it had been marked as a success. If you look at the one previous to it, it had been marked as scheduled. So nothing actually happened there. So something I need to look into. But essentially, this value here is what's being passed in to my Cloudflow, which is really cool. But what else happens? So obviously that flow runs. Now the rest of this won't continue running until that entire flow has completed. And once that flow has completed, it's going to pass back any of the error messages, which I get to in my subflow, which I'll show you in just a second. And it's going to basically make an array of results and update some results inside my SharePoint list based on the outcome of these, whether they failed or succeeded, based on that error handling which is in place from Power Automate Desktop. So let me just go back to my flows. So at the top of, I just realised you probably didn't see that, which I'll go through a little bit at the end of this. We should be finishing up very shortly. So let me just explain Subflows to you. So Subflows, if we click on the little drop down here, you can see that we've got this blue line on the right underneath main, which is the main flow. It's the flow that is currently active in your view. But we have this handled failed flows as well, which is something that I created. You can create multiple subflows and you can trigger them at certain points during your main flow. So if I, for example, open up my handled failed flows, you can see that I'm appending errors to a error to append result here, and then that result is what gets passed through back into Power Automate. So I'm just going to show you one last flow, and then we will finish up. Is there any questions going forward with anything here? I know this can get a little bit confusing. There's quite a lot to it, and it kind of takes a lot of trial and error to actually go and build stuff like this. As you'll probably see the first time you end up using Power Automate Desktop. But like I said, Solutions Day kind of covers the fundamental use case for this, which is nice. But yeah, is there any questions, any issues that you guys have been having with Power Automate Desktop? Or any questions maybe that you've never heard of Power Automate Desktop and you're looking to use it to solve a solution and wondering if you can solve a solution with it. Okay, so we're going to go into the final flow, and this is where the magic really happens. Probably the moment you've been waiting for, as they say. It's kind of a really cool thing which I'm about to show you, and this is the web recorder inside Power Automate Desktop. Now I'll do a bit more of a in-depth guide where perhaps I might build something for myself to actually show you this maybe in a future live session. But just for the purposes of this, I'll show you how it works, and you'll kind of see. And I'll show you as well how the run step by step actually can handle some of these actions as well. So let me share my screen with you again, and we'll open up that window capture. Let me just find the window that we need. I think it's this one, and I'll just pull that out as well, just so we've got a little bit more space to work with. There you go. So this is the flow socialslammer.posttwitterpost.videos. As I was saying about those naming conventions, it's very important to name those so you know exactly where to find things. So I know this is part of my social slammer, which was what we adequately named our solution. This is the post Twitter post, and this is the post the flow that posts a video, specifically using that video button. So we can see that we've got some things that are grayed out, which means they're not going to run. But what's important are the things that are not grayed out, and these are the things that will run when you run your flow. Now I'm going to choose to run this step by step to show you exactly how this works. And I'm not sure how I'm going to do this. I haven't actually got to this part yet. But we're going to run this action by action. So you can see that the first thing it's doing is it's kind of got rid of those actions. It's got rid of the main control interface around this, just so it knows that we are in run mode, and that we can't actually edit this until we finish running it. What's really cool at the bottom here is you can see how long the process of each step is taking, which is really good when you want to kind of nail down on a time scale for completing big bulk actions of things. So for example, if I wanted to post a social post to multiple platforms, I could time each one in here, and then I'd roughly have an idea as to how long the render, the laptop behind me, actually needs to go and post to those social platforms. We can see the first thing it's doing is it's just going to replace the text inside the post body and store the result in the post body. And this is just removing any information that's already inside there. And I can't remember exactly why we did this, but it was a issue as regards, I think it was if you put quotation marks in any part of your text, this gets passed through as JSON, I believe, which means that it actually gets rid of those quotation marks, and then you end up with a royal mess of junk which actually can't be used. So the next step that we see is the launch the new Microsoft Edge. So I'm just going to see if I can move this out of the way a little bit and give you a bit of space on my monitor to be able to see this. Let me see if I can move this over. For some reason it won't do a half lock screen, which is odd. But what I'll do is I'll just hide that for now. So this might be a little bit blurry, but I'll do my best to explain what's happening. So we're going to do the run new Microsoft Edge. Now if I press play, it's going to run through this very quickly and you won't be able to see what's going on. This is why I'm doing it in this way. I'll run the next step and you can see that a Microsoft Edge has opened, and this is our Twitter page. Now, we're going to run into a few issues here, and this is because I'm kind of drawing my focus away from this Edge screen. So I will have to, I'm not sure if this will work actually, because I'll be selecting on a different window, but I'll try it anyway. So it's gonna now wait for 5 seconds. So this is a thing that you can put in place called a wait. It's just a delay, a set amount of time that you can choose. But the reason we did this is just to allow our Twitter page to load. So if we had a slow internet connection, or Brenda there was waking up after her 3 hours sleep from posting the last post, it just gives your browser a little bit of time to load. So it's thinking about these things going forward, and you'll realise that sometimes this flow would work without this wait, sometimes you would need it, so it just made sense to have it there in the first place. So you can see it's going to wait for 5 seconds, and you'll see that little blue shade behind it will drop down to the next one. There we go. So the next thing it's going to do is going to click a link on a web page. So specifically this is looking for that tweet button, and I'm going to show you how to build this in another live session. I probably don't have time to go through this today, but it's essentially clicking on that tweet button in our web page. And you can see, just click next action, and we can see that we've got our creating a tweet option here. So again, we're going to wait for 5 seconds because things like these elements that you're opening on web pages, depending on your internet connection, can take time. So we're setting the clipboard text to our post body. Now, unfortunately, there's nothing being passed in here, so I'm not actually going to be putting anything in. So what I'll do is, just for the purposes of this, is I'm going to post we'll post a image. I'll find an image that we can use. So I'll stop my flow there. I'll go ahead and edit my variable. And I can go and delete this afterwards inside Twitter, but I will post this just for the sake of this video. And I'm going to look for my video location, so I'm going to find a video. Let's go and find a video locally on my machine. Let's see what we have. There's probably not much here, and I've got to remember where all of the the old stuff was, because we do have some really cool things, which I don't actually think's in here at the moment. So let's have a look. So I'm going to put this onto my desktop, and this is just going to be Jeff's workshop page. Just bear with me, just so I can get the location for this. So I need that there, I need a backslash, and we're going to do is it test video.mp4, and we'll see how this works. So this would have been the value that gets passed in from Power Automate, but again we'll show you this step by step. So I'll close Edge, we'll run this again from the beginning. So it's going to replace that text, it's going to launch Microsoft Edge. Just going to grab it to the side. It's going to wait 5 seconds and then move on to the next step. The next thing it's going to do is it's going to look for that tweet button, as I mentioned before. There it is. It's going to wait another 5 seconds. It's now going to select my clipboard text. So this is essentially what happens when you Control-C something, it saves it to the clipboard. So it's going to set that clipboard text to actually be my post body. So again, you won't see anything happen here. However, it's going to wait 5 seconds. And my post body now becomes the clipboard text. Next thing it's going to do, it's going to do a Control-V return. And what this does is it's actually just going to paste it. As we all know, Control-V pastes something. So we'll go ahead and we'll do Control-V. And that probably wouldn't post in because that would have been there. So obviously this is not going to work because I'm focusing on a different window, but I'll show you exactly what would be happening. So it's now going to do a tab return, and it's basically just going to select the media icon in here. So I press return, it's going to go ahead and find that. It's going to grab the location from our, I don't think I can actually grab this here. But it's going to go and grab the location from here, which is our test video. It's going to press open. So tab, turn, sets the video location, waits for the open window to appear, Control-V's that end, presses return, and it waits for 30 seconds. And this is just to give the video time to upload to the social platform. After 30 seconds, we're then going to do a tab, return. And you'll see why we do this. So we'll do a tab, return. So you can see this brings us over to our tweet button. We can press tweet, and we can see that we then wait for another 30 seconds, which gives this video time to be tweeted out to the public. So you can see that little blue bar running up at the top there. And after it does that wait for 30 seconds, which usually is enough time to upload a video, it's quite a big file, it then goes and closes the web browser. And it's basically getting the information which browser to close from that launch new Microsoft Edge browser. So it knows exactly which browser to close once it's done. And this basically is something that we didn't realize that we needed to implement into this solution until about 30 to 40 posts later. And we realized that our computer was getting very, very slow with all of those browsers that were being left open for each post that was created. But as you can see, if we scroll down, we can see that our video has now gone out. But essentially, this is the flow that would run whenever that Twitter variable was set to scheduled, which I showed you earlier. So I'll go into more on how to create these web recorder actions, because you can do all this kind of live inside your browser and choose what you want it to select, and you get these kind of nice little overlays. But if you do want to explore Power Automate Desktop a little bit more, I'm willing to do another demo maybe next week or the week after. I've got some more plans for some awesome live streams coming up as well as helping with the 5-day challenge as a support coach, which is really exciting for me as well. But yeah, I think that kind of covers everything that I kind of wanted to show you with Power Automate Desktop today. There is more advanced things that you can go into, I mean, like I said, I'm excited to share that with you if you are interested in learning more. But yeah, that kind of covers quite a few of the things that I wanted to share with you today. So if there's any more questions, I'll be around in chat for the next 10 to 15 minutes before our day 2 of 5-day challenge actually kicks off, which I'm excited to get back into. But yeah, I'll be around in chat. You'll see a logo pop up soon, but I will be around in chat if you have any more questions. So take care, and I will see you in the next one.